Welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for listening, as always. So as you know, we're on a break right now. We're not posting interviews because we're refreshing the format of the show. And I think it's going to take about 60 days, but I'm not entirely sure. In the meantime, we're reading essays that we've published on the magazine side of Together.guide. And today I'm going to read another essay that I wrote a while back called The Divorce Lawyer's Guide to Marriage Part 1. This is the first in a 4-part series. I'm probably going to read all 4 of them during this break, but I can't promise that I'll do them all in a row because we're getting submissions from some of our writers having read their essays. Anyway, here's part 1 of The Divorce Lawyer's Guide to Marriage. The most surprising lessons I learned as a divorce lawyer were about how to keep marriages alive. I realize that sounds counterintuitive. Being a divorce lawyer was desensitizing, and it was definitely challenging. I watched good people making mistakes that would last a lifetime. I was also in a unique position to help, but I was primarily being called upon for my battlefield expertise. My advice usually had to do with knowing when to disarm and how to de-escalate, and that advice was often ignored. I have seen more relationship mistakes than I ever imagined possible get repeated over and over. Ultimately, no longer wanting to be part of that cycle caused me to retire my law practice and focus instead on helping people develop healthy relationships. Now, this is not to say that all relationships are meant to last. Relationships ebb and flow, and sometimes it's just best to let them peacefully complete. My work now is largely in the area of allowing relationships to take their course rather than forcing some solution. Regardless of how a relationship plays out, the fundamentals of relationship health always apply. This series of articles is my attempt to review what I learned on the battlefield of divorce law. Part 1 is about, amongst other things, commitment. It's a term that we all toss around, but that we rarely really consider and understand. Commitment is a state of mind, and for that reason, it is entirely within our control. It's easy to define, of course, but it's hard to understand. Commitment is not a hope, it's not a promise, it's not an intention. It's more of a surrender to certainty, the type of surrender that a parent has in knowing that their child will be fed no matter the circumstances, the type of surrender that a skydiver has when stepping out of an airplane. Here's what I learned about the slippery concept of commitment as a divorce lawyer. 1, you're in it to win it, or you're not. With commitment comes clarity. When we become aware that we simply know something is true, that's the end of indecision and anxiety. Unexpected circumstances still arise, but you're committed to the path. There's no more to be done about it. You've jumped out of the airplane. There's no way to put that in reverse. And there's a kind of peace in that. Commitment in a relationship takes many forms, of course. Some of us commit for a time and some for a lifetime. Whatever the commitment, once you've made it, the rest is very simple. It's not easy. You'll do whatever it takes. Here's the tricky bit, results. On one hand, it's pretty clear that if you didn't do everything that it took, that you were committed to something else. That's okay. This is not a conversation about right and wrong. This is a conversation about being human. If you said you were committed, but you took actions that led to some other result, you were actually committed to something else. On the other hand, we're just not in control of outcomes all the time, your commitments notwithstanding. Sometimes, no matter how committed, hardworking, or emotionally clear you are, things just don't work out as planned. And that's fine too. The outcome isn't the point. The commitment is. The peace of commitment comes from surrender. You're signed up. You'll do everything you possibly can do, and that's simply the end of it. The consequences are whatever they are. Your job is done. When that peace is absent, it's a pretty good indication that you're actually committed to something else, to the outcome aligned with the actions that you actually took. For example, if you say that you're committed to monogamy, but you find yourself cheating, you're committed to something else. It could be pleasure, it could be polyamory, it could be unhappiness, we don't know, but you're definitely not committed to monogamy. Just get honest about your actual commitment. It's the most direct path to peace for everyone involved. When your relationship faces seemingly insurmountable challenges, you'll push through or you won't. Just because you're having a major challenge does not mean your relationship is doomed. It means your relationship is having a tough time, like every relationship sometimes does. The question is, what are you committed to? If you get clear on that, well, the peace follows. Every time. 2, go to therapy early and often. We all bring baggage from the past. That's just the human condition. Pretending it's not so won't change a thing. Going to therapy will. The most successful couples that I've known have all, without exception, attended couples therapy or attended couples workshops or something similar early in their relationships and with frequent tune-ups. You can't see the back of your head without a mirror, and you can't see the impact of your personal baggage without the help of an expert. And if you're thinking that you don't need help, look, you're either being naive or you're avoiding something you don't want to face. It's that simple. You're human and you have challenges. Handle them now or watch them grow later. Later, they'll grow again and you'll have to handle them again. It's like weeding a garden. Look, this may be tough medicine for you, or maybe it's not, but it's a simple fact in a committed relationship. More deeply, the reason below the reason for divorce is scapegoating. Nobody wants to face this, but we are all responsible for our own experience. It is ours alone. Tough circumstances certainly arise, and some partners are not the match that we want. That's all true. But this is our own responsibility and nobody else's. There is something about long-term relationships that causes our personal issues to rise to the surface more quickly than in anything else in life. Perhaps it's because we're so close that we let our guard down. Whatever the reason, it's easy to scapegoat our partners for our feelings when they come up. And it may be true that our partners do trigger those feelings, but the feelings themselves belong to us. They are not our partner's fault. The blame game, which we all want to play, just leads to breakup. To avoid that, go to a therapist and learn about yourself. Now that said, the form of help isn't nearly as important as being proactive before the challenges set in. Successful couples lay the foundation of self-awareness and communication before the inevitable hardships arrive. This can be done in therapy, or in a course or a workshop, or with a trusted counselor like a pastor or a rabbi, or even by reading self-help books. The point is to get started early. Trying to pour concrete in the rain, well, it's foolish, you know that. Lay it down and let it dry before the rainy season arrives. It's common sense. Now, I do believe the form is less important than the timing, but one word of caution here. Seeking help exclusively from friends is nearly uniformly a bad idea. Friends play a different role in our lives than that of a neutral advisor. They're too caught up in our stories to provide objective relationship guidance. As a divorce lawyer, I saw well-meaning friends muddle relationships more times than I can count. Rather than burdening your friends with something that they're just not equipped to handle, find a good therapist or some kind of neutral advisor. Trust me, I'm a lawyer. Well, I used to be. 3, conflict is inevitable. Use it as your key. Conflict is inevitable in a committed relationship. When it arises, you've got 3 choices. Ignore it and let it fester. Break up and see it again in your next relationship. Or use it to understand yourself and your partner. The last option is how we create trust and intimacy, and obviously it's the one that I support. Now, this is probably the core of my philosophy about relationships. Intimate partnerships drive up unresolved issues. If we explore those issues, we create depth. It's our sacred duty to be available to heal our life partners in these moments and to deal with our own issues that arise in relationships. Look, it's a scary process. There's something risky about acknowledging our fears. It's a challenging process. When our partners get triggered, chances are we're triggered also. And if you're like me, all you want to do is run away in those moments. But it's a valuable process and possibly the entire point of being in a relationship in the first place. 4, choose your battles and choose your timing. Maybe you don't think about them as battles in the first place. That's probably healthy. But since most people do think of them that way, at least be smart about them. First off, you're not that important. And your personal desires, fears, and opinions, if you're being honest, they usually don't matter as much as the health of your partnership. From that point of view, take a breath and consider if it's really necessary to win every skirmish. Like who gets the remote, whose turn it is to do the dishes, what tone of voice he used with that question. Maybe it's true that your happiness does depend on this one skirmish, but probably not. Your happiness probably has a lot more to do with allowing peace in your relationship rather than forcing some change or circumstance. Second is timing. Do you really need to ask about repairing the screen door the moment your partner gets in from work? Probably not. This does raise the question, however, when is the right time? Well, and the second question, what is the right issue? If you let yourself become still and quiet, you probably know the answer. That said, One solution that I've seen work for many couples is a scheduled, structured meeting. Once a week, set aside time to talk about the details and break it down into 3 categories. 1, administrative money and time planning. 2, personal and emotional issues. 3, sex and intimacy. In each of these categories, start by discussing what's working before you discuss what could be even better. And notice how I frame that. It could be even better because, frankly, it's already pretty good. And when you talk about the what could be even better, limit that discussion to just 2 items in each category. Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to discuss the other issues because you'll be doing this the next week and the week after. Work on handling one issue at a time deeply and well, and then move on to the next. Here again, the structure doesn't matter as much as the proactivity. Issues build up if you don't manage them on a regular basis, so you've got to figure out a structure that does manage them. And this will be uncomfortable at first, but I can tell you from experience that with dedication, it just gets easier. 5, some things are worth standing your ground for, but lovingly. Boundaries are critically important in every relationship, and more so in long-term commitment. It's our boundaries that give us definition. Boundaries tell us what's okay and what's not. Boundaries, in some sense, tell us who and what we are. Without boundaries, relationships quickly become codependent at best and abusive at worst. Now, a phenomenon I noticed in divorce was that people who had never before established healthy boundaries in the past and then began doing so suddenly often erred on the side of holding them with anger and aggression. Now, this is better than not having boundaries at all, but doing this often results in pushing loved ones away. Boundary holding really is an art form. First, you have to know your boundaries, and next you have to actually tell your loved ones when they're over that line. So here's my advice on holding a boundary. Be firm, but loving. Do not let your boundaries get crossed, but be gentle in how you articulate the limits. If you're in a relationship, you want to develop love. You don't want to antagonize. Sometimes your partner is definitely going to push your boundaries. Nonetheless, treat them as a partner, someone that you love. Now, this does not mean letting them cross the boundary. It means firmly holding the boundary and doing it lovingly, honestly, and clearly. In part 2 of this series, which I think I'll probably read next week, I'll cover some universal relationship truths that I learned as a divorce lawyer. For instance, I'll tell you how you can win any fight and how it's almost never worth the cost. Well, that's it for part 1 of the Divorce Lawyer's Guide to Marriage. I hope you enjoyed it. As you know, we're taking a break right now from posting interviews. We're working on refreshing the format of the show. I've got some ideas. I think I'm on track for what we're going to do for the reboot, but I really would love to hear from you. So if you're listening to this and you have some ideas, reach out. I can't even tell you how happy it makes me to hear from listeners. You can email me at host@together.guide or use social. On Twitter, we're at together_show. Instagram is the same, together_show. And Facebook is facebook.com/togethershow. All right, folks, thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.